Hello, sir. How are you and where are you from?
I'm very good, thank you. My name is Hamid, 31 years old, and I'm from France. Moved in Japan 2 years ago.
How is Japan different from your home country?
All right, well, that's a good question. There are a lot of common points between France and Japan. The biggest difference I would say is that Japan is a lot about like group culture. So you have to act like it's a lot about the harmony of the group. So people don't tend to be outside of the group. They don't have like very strong individualities. Whereas like when you're in France, it's more about like the individual who primes. So it's more people are more let's say comfortable with going with conflict. So they tend to express a little bit more their opinion. While here in Japan, it's more you have to keep harmony in the group. So you avoid to have like very, let's say, very taboo discussions or very deep discussions, for example, in politics and such like discussions that could maybe create some conflict between people. So this is where I see the main difference. Japan is more about the group, while in France it's more about like the individual. So that's for me the biggest difference I would see between the two countries.
So, what specific experiences have you faced being French in Japan?
All right. So overall, France has a very good image in Japan. So people, when you're in Japan and you say that you are from France, all the reactions are always very positive. People tend to like France. They tell you about their travel in France, the fact that they like the food. So no, there is like no negative image of France. So for me, there is no like specific events or like experience being French here. You tend to meet a lot of French people in Japan. I think like Japan also has a very good image in France, and there is a lot of French people in Tokyo here, so it's quite easy to meet French people. And reciprocally, Japanese people, they tend to like French people a lot. So that's very easy on for that.
What advice would you give other French people who are looking to come to Japan?
All right. So it depends if you're looking to visit or if you're looking to live in Japan. If you plan to visit, the advice I would give is try to go where people don't go. So for example, if you go to Kyoto, try to visit temples that are not loaded with tourists. Like the places lose a bit of their charms when you have like a lot of buses of tourists and like it's very noisy and so on. So either you try to go to places where there is not so many tourists, or you try to shift the time when you go. For example, you go very early in the morning, 6 a.m., you see no one, or you go a little bit later in the evening when all the buses have left the city and you can enjoy, let's say, a little bit more calm in the city, and you get better experience, I think, when you do that for visits. And if it's to live here in Japan, the first advice I would have to say is, get comfortable with the language, because otherwise you'll feel a lot of barriers in your daily life. And the second one is, you tend to feel a bit lonely when you arrive in Japan. So try to make friends with locals. But like the easiest way to do it is probably to get friends with Japanese people who have lived abroad. So it's easier, they have like a more global mindset. So for that you create connection more easily than with like regular Japanese who do not speak the language of English or never been outside. So that's...
How can you overcome that loneliness?
Well, you need to be ready to like work on yourself and to be, how to say, comfortable being by yourself at first. So you arrive here, you explore the country, you explore the city, you explore your neighborhood. You get a few let's say you do sports, you enter into a few clubs, so you meet people, you go to your local izakaya, you may meet a few people there. You can register for like meetups, activities where a lot of foreigners gather. So that's the kind of stuff that helps you meet people and get let's say better being by yourself. And that's what I would say.
What was the biggest adjustment you had to make while living in Japan?
Yeah, so the biggest adjustment I had to make was to get accommodated to my new working environment. And the long working hours, the not so many vacations, and also the fact that I would be doing a lot of business trips. So that would be the first thing that I had to accommodate. Like the rhythm of the working pace I had was quite different in France than in Japan, so I had to accommodate for that. And the second one was, so the loneliness was quite tough for where I'm coming from in France. I live near my family. We have like a pretty big family, so I'm surrounded by people I know in my small village. I meet my family on a daily basis, and when you get back, you arrive here in Japan and you get back from work and you are like living in your own flat. Nights can be very very lonely, so that's like one of the first things you need to adapt to it.
Despite the loneliness and work culture in Japan, what made you decide to leave France to come here?
So that's a good question. Initially, I was working in Japan as a business trip, so I was coming and going back from France to Japan, and then I met a small startup, and the package they offered me was substantial. So the salary, the flight tickets, accommodation and so on. So that was the reason for me to say, okay, I'm going to try it in Japan with this company. In my case, it was a bit like I was a bit of a rare candidate for them because so I have like a niche experience in vaccine manufacturing, and that's what the company was looking for. Plus, I was fluent in Japanese and English, and I had like experience in working in Europe, in US. So it was a perfect match for the company. It was not like a big Japanese company because it was a startup, and half of you have two mother companies. One is American, one is Japanese. So the culture is a bit like more US type of companies. So they were looking for a foreigner to be like this kind of intermediate between the US and Japan. And for me, I was, let's say, a perfect match. So they offered me a very good package, better conditions than what I had in France. So I said, okay, I'm jumping on that. And like career base, that's probably the best place where I could be at the moment in my career. So this is why I made the choice for Japan.
Do you think you can make more money in Japan or in France?
It really depends on your job industry. If you are like a regular, if you don't have a very like specific experience or like skills, you may get the same salary in Japan and in France, a bit lower in Japan probably if you consider the current exchange rate of the yen. It may be a little bit lower, but the cost of life in Japan are a little bit lower than what you have in France or in US. So in all, in my case, it was quite a good jump in terms of salary moving to Japan. Like probably more like plus 40% or something like that. But like for regular jobs, you may need to consider very deeply. Okay, what are you looking for? Are you looking for like the experience to be living in Japan? So you may accept to have like a lower salary, or are you coming here because you can get a higher salary than what you get in your own country? It's really like specific on the industry and the type of company you are working in. So in my case, yeah, it was one of the main reasons I moved here. I got a better salary than in a French company. So this is why I jumped.
Would you consider starting a family in Japan?
Indeed. So, yeah. I can do it. You can, like financially speaking, I can do it. And then culturally speaking, I feel comfortable enough in Japan. I don't face any kind of barriers. Like the language is okay, the administration I get by myself. So I don't feel like I need any help, or I feel like disabled to move around in the Japanese society. So yeah, starting a family here, definitely. That if I stay long here, 31, that's my second year here. If I'm here for long term, so yeah, the idea of starting a family, it will come up soon, I believe. So yeah, I will do it. The only issue I have with that is probably like the Japanese school system. I'm not very huge fan of the schooling system in Japan. I think like it's more like it's very stressful on the kids, very long hours and all that, like to push the kids to like get into the entrance exam. So for me, I'm not a fan of this kind of like learning everything, memorizing everything, and like learning kanjis. That like, does it make sense nowadays to learn kanjis? I don't know. If like if you are like a mixed like international couple, do you want your kids to be like fully Japanese, or do you want them to be, for example, bilingual? They get like an education in English, and on the side they get like a Japanese type of education, so that they are able to move around in the Japanese society. So that's are points to consider when you're a foreigner. If you want to have kids, for like, is it your partner is Japanese or is your partner foreigner also? That's like very big difference, I think. So in my case, I would do it. I would start a family here, no issue with that. The schooling system, like where do you put your kids? That would be like a big question for me on that part. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this interview, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's a great time and very cold here, but I like it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.